Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Facebook Live event, Egypt. My name is Claire, and I am part of the team here at Inspiring Vacations. I'm very excited to introduce to you our special guest for today, none other than our head of travel, Brendon Cooper. Welcome, Brendon.
Hello, Claire. How are you? It is such a pleasure to be here today. And I'm really excited, actually. We're going on a fantastic journey today of one of the most captivating ancient civilizations in history. And really for a lot of people when they do visit this destination, it's a life-changing experience.
And we're in for a real treat, as I believe that you've travelled this journey before, Brendon.
I have, and look, it's just stuck with me since I was there. It was back in 2018, and look, it's just an absolutely, for me, one of the most bucket list trips you could possibly do in your life, and something that's just resonated with me since I've come back and just fell in love with the destination. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go on a journey to Egypt, but just to get everybody ready to go. We're going to pack our bags, we're going to board our plane, and we're actually going to take off to Egypt right now. So we're on our way. We're cruising at 40,000 feet so far. So here we go. And we've landed. Welcome to Egypt. As you can see, it is just such a iconic view to see the ribbon of the Nile running through the full length of the country, an absolute oasis. And when you do arrive in Egypt, you are greeted by Cairo. And Cairo, for me, is just really understated. It's such a fantastic destination, and it's been there for such a long period of time in terms of being inhabited. And it actually dates back to 2000 BC. It's just rich with history. And on landing in Cairo, look, it can be a little bit daunting. It is busy, it is chaotic, and maybe for the uninitiated traveler, it can seem a little bit daunting. But once you get over that fact, it's absolutely a fantastic city to visit. And you can actually see local Egyptians going about their everyday lives on every single corner that you turn. And it's just such a great place to go to. So what we are going to do, and there's no point standing on ceremony, we're actually going to take you now to why everybody wants to come and see Egypt. And that obviously is the pyramids. Now, they are the sole remaining intact survivor of the seven wonders of the ancient world. And so if anyone's been to Turkey, there is another survivor. It's the Temple of Artemis. However, the difference here is the Temple of Artemis in Turkey is about 5 stones on the ground. And you have to really use your imagination to actually envisage what that looked like thousands of years ago. Not so with the pyramids. So just to get you in the mood for this spectacular sight, enjoy this short video.
Wow. How long does it typically take to travel from our hotel to the pyramid site, Brendon?
Well, let's have a look at that now. So here we go. We're on our way to the pyramids. And we are presented with this incredible sight. It's absolutely awe-inspiring. So to have a look to see where our hotel is located, if we just go to an overview of the destination, unbelievably, for our lucky customers in so many of our tours, our hotel is actually right here. This is the Le Méridien, and actually overlooks the incredible view of the pyramids and gives you your first glimpse at these fantastic icons that so many people in the past have looked at. And it's in the backyard of Cairo. What I always thought, is you would be going out into the desert and you'd be going into these magical sort of sand dunes as you're making your way out to the pyramids of Egypt. Not so. The urban sprawl has actually just reached the edge of the pyramids here, but it's still...
Sorry to interrupt. I think our screen shares disappeared there for some reason.
Okay. Let's try that again.
Technology.
How's that?
Much better. Thank you.
All righty. Like I was saying, for those that missed this, the Le Meridian is located right here, is just on the edge of the desert, right in front of the pyramids of Giza, and Cairo sits just behind it. So in order to get to the pyramids, it's a 5-minute drive from your hotel, which is absolutely incredible. And then when you do arrive at the destination, you are presented with this amazing view.
That's fantastic. And I know that you mentioned awe-inspiring before, but talk us through what it felt like when you arrived.
Look, I was blown away. It's one of those things that as a child, as an adult, it's something that you've read in countless books, you've seen in countless movies. And it's really just one of those things which that over the course of time, anyone from pharaohs to conquerors to anyone of all ages has kind of stood at the steps of these great spectacles. And for me, it was just one of those moments of realizing something that you've seen your entire life, that you're actually there in person.
Oh, fantastic. And what are some of the most popular questions that customers have arriving there?
It's a funny one. I mean, when I was there, our guide was one of the very first questions she asked, and she was absolutely fantastic, so knowledgeable, was who built the pyramids? And everyone was really quick to answer. We all said, obviously the pharaohs had lots of slaves, and it was the slaves that built the pyramids. Some people say aliens, obviously, but we were all quick to say slaves. And she was very, very quick to correct us. What they actually believe now is that there was around 100,000 paid workers that actually constructed the pyramids. And instead of being paid in money like you and I, they actually got paid in the most fascinating currency of all. They actually were paid in beer and bread. Now, the reason behind that is back then, you can imagine, water wasn't as clean as it is today. Beer was actually the safest liquid to drink. And therefore, these actual workers did it for the love of their pharaoh. And they were paid to construct these incredible structures.
Fantastic.
One of the other things that we get asked quite a bit, and I'm going to show you another fantastic site right now, is can you go inside? And the answer to that question is yes. And here we go. We are standing at the steps of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And this is actually the pyramid that was constructed for Khufu. Now, yes, you can actually go inside the pyramids and actually see what is inside these amazing structures. Now, for me, when I arrived, I was like, okay, this makes sense. I can see the entrance is up there, and that's fantastic. And I can't wait to get up there. That entrance there was reserved for the pharaoh. And the pharaohs, funnily enough, they were treated like gods on earth. For us mortals, the entrance is actually down here. Very, very understated little gap in the rock. But you can actually go inside. So there is a small fee to do that. It's around 20 Australian dollars. And you can actually line up to go inside this Great Pyramid. Now, a word of warning. If you are at all claustrophobic, it might be one to miss. Now, when you do get inside, the passageways are quite narrow. The Egyptians must have been much, much smaller than us. But actually, to get inside to the sarcophagus room, you've got to make your way through a series of narrow passageways. Now, some of them open to wider spaces, but there will be times when you are significantly hunched over. And because these are so popular to visit, what you've got to deal with is people going in and people coming out of the same passage. It's, once you get in, absolutely incredible. And if you can do it, and if you're not afraid of the narrow spaces, obviously something everyone wants to do and say that they've been inside one of the Great Pyramids. A hot tip though, if it's not for you and you don't want to make your way through that little walkway, what you can do, and if we go back to this picture here, there's actually 3 pyramids. You can actually go inside the smallest one. It's around 10 Australian dollars to go inside, and it's much, much easier. And you actually get a very, very similar experience. You don't have to walk as far. And once you do get inside, you're presented with, obviously, the sarcophagus of the pharaoh that obviously was put to rest at those pyramids. And one of the most incredible facts of the Great Pyramid is, once you're inside, you wonder, how did they get this sarcophagus in here once the pharaoh died? Interestingly enough, the entire structure was actually built around the sarcophagus. The sarcophagus is made out of one solid piece of marble, and it's actually too big to go through any of the passageways. So they built this incredible structure with the intention of having this sarcophagus sit in the middle of it, which, it just boggles the mind how back in those times, they had the capabilities to construct something this massive with that foresight.
Incredible.
What we are going to do, we're actually going to leave Cairo now, and we're going to head upstream in this magical Nile, and we're going to head to the oasis of Aswan. And so what we're going to do is we're going to jump there right now.
And I believe you can travel there on an overnight train. Is that right, Brendon?
You can. So all of our groups do the overnight train down to Aswan. Now, it is a great experience. And, for me, I think part of traveling to some of these destinations is you really have to have that local experience, do what the locals do. And the train travel is very, very much part of that. The locals all travel by train. I think it gives you a really, really great taste of Egyptian life. Now, it's not the Orient Express. But it's very comfortable. So you get your own private cabin. It sleeps 2 people. You've got a door. You can put all your bags inside. And so you have a seat by day, which folds into a bed by night. And so then you arrive into Aswan the following morning, and you're presented with this great, fantastic oasis away from the hustle and bustle of Cairo.
Sounds fantastic. Sounds absolutely incredible.
And what you're presented with is... Here we go. We are now standing on the banks of the Nile. And it's just such a contrast to coming from the big city of the Cairo is to now be presented with these views. And, it's a view that's kind of unchanged for the millennia. You always use the Nile as a means of transport. And it always was conducted by sailboats, to which they still do this day. And you see this iconic site. So this is known as a felucca. And they use them both for tourist purposes, but they also still use them to ship things up and down the river. Yes, there's obviously been a few modern developments with motors and stuff like that, but it really does give you a glimpse into what that ancient Egyptian life has been like, for hundreds, if not thousands of years. What I like about this image is, if you have a look here in the background, this hotel is actually one of the hotels we use. It's the Movenpick. And so for our 16-day Treasures of Egypt, you actually get to stay at this property. It's located out on a nice private island, which you then board these fantastic little shuttles to get you across the Nile and back. But there is nothing like sitting, watching the sun go down over the Nile with a drink, staying at a very, very nice 5-star hotel.
Oh, that sounds divine. Absolutely divine.
Now, Aswan isn't without its treasures. It is the place where you board the cruise. And so this is where a lot of the Nile cruises will depart from, and they head up the river back towards Cairo. But before you leave, there is some treasures located in this town. Now, we're going to go and have a look at the unfinished obelisk. I think what is important to note, now remember where this sits. So it's not located right next to the banks of the Nile. It's a fair bit inland, and it's actually uphill. It's important to remember that fact as we start looking at the next view. Here we go. We are making our way into the unfinished obelisk. And here we are, we have arrived. What this is, it's an archaeological dig site. So this is actually a quarry that the Egyptians used to use to mine granite. And they used to use the granite in a variety of different forms. And one of them was to build these obelisks. And what has actually been left here is incredible. There is the unfinished obelisk, as it's known. And what it actually shows you, it gives you insight into how these things were actually carved. Now, you have to remember, they didn't have modern day tools. They didn't have strong metals which they could chisel away at the rock. They had soft metals which wouldn't work on things like granite. What they actually had to use was stone on stone. They would find a stone that was harder than the granite itself. And if you have a look down this end here, you see all these little divots that have eaten away at the stone. It's actually the process of grinding that stone over the granite in order to shape it. And so who knows how long that would have taken? I imagine it would have taken months, if not years, to create something like this. And they would physically cut it out of the rock using this stone on stone. Now, if you've ever started a project and for whatever reason, you weren't able to complete it for something that was out of your control, this probably takes the cake. Unfortunately for the ancient Egyptians, and very fortunately for us, because it gives us insight into how this was done, but unfortunately for them, it actually developed a crack. Now, obelisks need to be made of one continuous piece of granite, and that's how they are. If you go to the Temple of Karnak or you go to Luxor Temple, you'll see other obelisks. They are made of one solid piece of stone, and so this one actually had to be discarded, which would have been, I imagine, heartbreaking for the people that were constructing it. But it does give us the ability to actually see how they made these things. And if you think back to that first image that I showed you of the overview of where this quarry is located, the next question is, how did they get it down to the river? Because they would have used the Nile to ship it upstream. I guess it just blows your mind to think of how they did this without the modern day instruments that you and I would be familiar with.
Absolutely. You can only begin to imagine.
It's such an understated site. I really thoroughly enjoyed visiting this one when I was there, and something that I think any trip to Aswan has to go to, because it just gives you that insight into how they actually did these things. What we're going to do now is we're going to head back downstream. So we're heading back towards Cairo, probably to Egypt's crown jewel, I think it's fair to say. And so we've just made our trip down the Nile. And what we're now on the outskirts of Luxor. So Luxor, obviously the old ancient capital, and it really holds some of the most fascinating sites of Egypt. What sits on the outskirts of that is Valley of the Kings. For me, it trumped the pyramids. I thought it was unbelievable in terms of what was actually located here. And I think that's a really big call. Everyone goes to Egypt to obviously see the pyramids. You know, I think most people after leaving Egypt it will be Valley of the Kings they take away with them. So what we have here is a bit of an overview of the valley itself. Now, a word of warning: it is swelteringly hot. I was here in summer, so it would have been a bit hotter for me than some of the other months of the year. 100%, you need to take plenty of water, a hat, some good walking shoes, and just be prepared to be out in the sun this day. Now, you arrive down at the visitors centre, which is down in this area down here. And luckily, to save a very hot walk up the valley, they have electric trains which take you from the visitors centre up into the valley itself. And so we are taking that train right now, and we are going to find ourselves in the Valley of the Kings.
Fantastic.
Now, this is the main area, and all dotted around here are the entrances to the tombs. So up here is one, and there's actually 18 tombs. Now, what will happen is you'll get a ticket to visit 3 of them, and you'll be able to go into 3 of the different tombs. And that ticket doesn't include King Tut's tomb. So if you want to go see Tutankhamun's tomb, there is an extra $10 ticket, highly worth it. And just a hot tip, you also in Egypt, a lot of the time at these really, really iconic sites, is they'll actually charge to take photos, which, you know, I think's fair considering the cost of the entry is so low. So if you do want to take photos when you're in here, you can purchase a photography ticket. It's around 25 Australian dollars to do that. And you're going to come away with some of the most incredible images.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for those great tips. I believe that you managed to record a sneak peek inside a tomb for us.
I did. Let's go have a look. So what we'll do is we'll now go inside one of these incredible tombs. And you're just presented with this mesmerizing sight. You know, the colors that have remained for millennia now, really. They're as vivid as the day they were almost created. And partly that's due to the very, very dry air of the desert has preserved these things. And it's absolutely mesmerizing. And this short video is actually of this exact tomb. And apologies for the people talking in the background, but it still gives you a great indication of what this was like. So we'll jump. Now, we'll share our screen again. It would appear the Egyptians developed video surveillance cameras as well. So there is some of those located inside the tombs, but it is just amazing. If you have a look at the walls, every single inch is pretty much coated in hieroglyphics. And the fantastic thing about Valley of the Kings is other locations that you go in Egypt, especially the ones that are outdoors, the color unfortunately has disappeared. It's faded over time. It's obviously been out in the elements. This has not, and you can really see how it was done and how it was created for when the pharaoh obviously passed through to the afterlife. These tell stories about the pharaoh's lives, and it just talks about them as leaders. And for me, it was just absolutely jaw-dropping.
Such rich history there, Brendon. Thank you so much for taking us through that virtual tour of Egypt. Now, I believe that you have a special offer for our audience today. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, we absolutely do. And it's a perfect way to get to Egypt. What we're offering today, and obviously for all the viewers that we have here this afternoon, is we're actually offering $500 off per booking on any of our Egypt trips. We have quite a few available, ranging from around 12 to 13 days, right up to 21 days, 27 days if you want to include Egypt and Jordan and Israel as well. So for anybody that's here today, for the next 7 days, there is a code. It's Egypt 500. It will be on your screens. And if you enter that code in at the time of making your booking, you'll be able to receive $500 off your next trip to Egypt.
Fantastic. What a great opportunity to tick Egypt off your bucket list. Now, let's see if we have any questions coming through today. We do. We've got plenty of questions here, Brendon. So if that's okay, I'll just take up a little bit more of your time.
Go for it.
Now, are the guides on tour Egyptologists? Oh, my pronunciation there might be a bit off.
Yep. So actually by law in Egypt, to be a tour guide, you have to have a degree. And most of them, because they're passionate about the industry, have a degree in ancient history. And so it's actually a requirement to be what they have coined an Egyptologist.
Wow. Now, I have another question from Barry, and he would like to know, can we go to the Valley of the Queens, and how far is it from the Valley of the Kings?
So you can go and see. Now I forget the name of the pharaoh herself, but you do go on the way to Valley of the Kings to actually visit her temple, and that was her burial site. It's very different to Valley of the Kings. It's actually carved into the rock, and it's a much more significant structure than it is in Valley of the Kings. But you do get to go there before arriving at this part of Valley of the Kings.
Great. Is the mummy of King Tutankhamun still in his tomb? Are you aware of that one?
It's not, no. So King Tutankhamun's tomb, it's a funny one. He was a child pharaoh, so quite young, and they believe that he was actually sick when he was reigning, so he didn't unfortunately live a very long life. His tomb is actually, compared to the one that we're looking at here, is very, very understated. It's much smaller. It's a single stairway and probably opening into a standard size sort of family room type size. He's not in there anymore. He's been moved to the Cairo Museum, and so have all of his treasures. So it was the iconic thing about his discovery was that he was actually found with most of the treasures that he was buried with. With all of these tombs that you see, unfortunately, they've been looted and plundered over time. And so what's left is the art. But Tutankhamun's one actually had some of the items that he was buried with, which has given them so much insight into the burial rituals of the pharaohs.
Mm-hmm. Now, Laura is also keen to visit the Valley of the Kings, and she'd like to know roughly how long do you get to explore the Valley of the Kings when you're there?
100% enough time. As I said, it's a very warm location to be in, but you do get to go into 3 of the tombs. We were there for around 4 hours, and that was plenty of time, to be honest. The tombs themselves, I'm trying to show on this one. You can't quite see, so probably about 20 meters beyond where these people are standing would be the entrance to the tomb itself. And then when you come down into the tombs, it's just the burial chamber here that you're kind of presented with. So you probably have sort of half an hour to go through each tomb, which is completely enough. Then you get time to go into King Tut's tomb as well. And all up, we were there for around 3 to 4 hours.
Now, Karina would like to know, if you are a single traveller, do you get your own cabin on the train?
Yes, you do. So it's not we won't pair people on the train. You'll get your own cabin.
Fantastic. Barry has a question about currency. Do you recommend cash or cards? Are their ATMs there?
Cash is definitely the way. Now it's a question as to whether you take Egyptian pounds or US dollars. They will accept both. It's actually quite hard to get Egyptian pounds prior to leaving for Egypt, and to be honest, it's probably better to get them locally. I took some US dollars. They like the smaller notes, so 1s, 5s, 10s and 20s are the best, and then anything above that becomes quite hard to exchange. But if you wanted to get Egyptian pounds, our Australian bank cards or the New Zealand bank cards will work in their ATMs. And so you actually can draw out Egyptian pounds locally. And there's actually heaps of places to do that on arrival at the airport.
Great. Now, Mitt has a question that's also on my lips. When is the best time for us to travel there, Brendon?
I went in August. August is great. It's middle of summer, so it's probably not the ideal time to go due to the climate. What is good about going in August is the crowds are less significant, and that is one positive, but it is hot. So most people tend to go either October, November, or at the start of the following year. So January, February, March tend to be the most popular time. So their winter is probably the ideal time to go. However, the crowds will be bigger because that's when everyone wants to be there. And so if you're happy to brave the heat, if you go sort of on the shoulder months of that, those sort of Septembers and Aprils, can be really pleasant times to visit just purely because there's less people. Great
tips there. What are the usual number of people on some of the tours that we've got, Brendon?
Yeah, so we've got 2 different styles of tours. We operate small group tours and we operate larger group tours. So for our smaller group tours, we cap them at 16 to 20 people, depending on the tour that you pick. So really, really comfortable size to travel around with, and great for when you're in places like this where there's big crowds because it's just easy to navigate. And then we've got some larger group tours which go up to 40.
Great. Now, Odette would like to know, would you suggest combining Egypt with Jordan in one trip?
Like, if you're there, you're there. And I just think if you can afford the time and you're in that part of the world, 100% definitely get over there to experience that. Because, you know, it's got its own draw cards to Egypt and just a great place to go to as well. So if you've got the time, definitely get to Jordan as well.
Fantastic. I think that we've worked our way through most of the questions. What we might do, if it's okay with you, Brendon, if there are any further questions, are you happy to answer those after they come through?
Of course.
Fantastic. Look, Brendon, thank you so much for your time today and sharing with us this very special destination of Egypt. I, for one, have absolutely loved it. Thank you so much for your time.
Look, it's been great to talk about it. It's just such a favourite place of mine, and I really think one that everyone should visit. So thanks to everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.